The moment Ethan Brooks walked through the cafe door, 12 phones turned on. They weren't there for coffee. They were there for content. A viral moment. A laugh at someone else's expense. By the window sat Lydia Cross, wheelchair positioned carefully, chin lifted in quiet defiance she'd practiced 100 times before. She didn't know she was the punchline. Neither did Ethan. But in a room full of people betting on cruelty, one man was about to make the choice that would change everything. This is the story of a setup that backfired, a kindness that went viral, and the truth that what we do when no one important is watching defines exactly who we are. Before we begin, if you appreciate stories about dignity, respect, and the power of choosing kindness even when the world expects you to walk away, hit that like button. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The spring rain had stopped an hour before Ethan Brooks pulled his truck into the parking lot of the Meridian Cafe, leaving the asphalt slick and reflective under the late afternoon sun. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, studying the upscale establishment through the windshield. Glass and chrome, exposed brick, the kind of place where a cup of coffee probably costs more than his lunch. He glanced down at his shirt, his best one, light blue button-down he'd ironed himself while his daughter Emma ate cereal at the kitchen table that morning. The sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with the honest wear of a man who worked with his hands. There was a small stain near the third button he'd missed, barely visible but there nonetheless. He rubbed at it uselessly. "You look nice, Daddy," Emma had told him, milk on her upper lip, gap-toothed smile bright as summer. Like a prince, but not the boring kind. 7 years old and already wiser than he'd ever be. Ethan checked his phone. 3:15. He was right on time, which meant he was probably early by the standards of people who frequented places like this. The text from Marcus had been simple. Blind date. 3:30. The Meridian. Her name's Lydia. Trust me, man. You need this. Marcus Chen had been his friend since high school, one of the few who'd stuck around after Ethan's life had imploded 3 years ago, after Sarah left, after the divorce that hollowed him out and reshaped him into something smaller, quieter, more careful. Marcus knew what those years had cost. The late nights when Emma cried for her mother, the shame of explaining to a kindergartner why some people leave, the exhaustion of being everything to someone so small. So when Marcus said, "Trust me," Ethan tried to. He climbed out of the truck, straightened his collar, and walked toward the entrance. The cafe's interior was exactly what he'd expected. Polished concrete floors, pendant lights hanging like glass tiers, tables of light wood arranged with calculated casualness. Soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers. The clientele was a curated collection of designer jeans and MacBooks. Conversations conducted in the hushed tones of people who believed their thoughts mattered more when whispered. Ethan felt immediately, profoundly out of place. His eyes scanned the space, looking for a woman sitting alone. There, by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street. Dark hair, elegant features, dressed in a cream-colored blouse that caught the light. She was turned slightly away, gazing out at the rain-washed sidewalk, and there was something in the set of her shoulders that spoke of both strength and weariness. She was beautiful. That was his first thought. His second thought arrived when he took another step and his angle shifted. She was in a wheelchair. The realization came without judgment, just simple fact. The chair was sleek, modern, the kind designed for active use rather than institutional sterility. Her hands rested on the wheels with a familiarity that spoke of years, not months. Ethan felt something twist in his chest, not discomfort, but protectiveness. The same instinct that flared when he saw Emma's classmates exclude the quiet kid at recess. The world had taught him that different usually meant harder, and harder usually meant lonely. He approached, weaving between tables, and as he did, he became gradually aware of attention shifting in his direction. Heads turning, whispers starting. A woman at a nearby table nudged her companion, nodding toward him with barely concealed amusement. Something felt wrong. The woman by the window must have sensed him approaching. She turned, and Ethan found himself looking into eyes that were simultaneously hopeful and guarded. The expression of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to trust easily, but wasn't quite ready to stop hoping entirely. "Lydia?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. That would be me. Her smile was small, testing. You must be Ethan. Guilty. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, noting the way relief flickered across her features. Sorry if I'm a little early, habit of a guy who lives by appointment times. Mechanic, right? Lydia tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that felt both evaluative and oddly vulnerable. Marcus mentioned you fix things. Cars mostly, sometimes appliances. Once, memorably, a carnival ride when the operator was desperate and I was young and stupid. Ethan grinned. It worked for about 6 minutes before the whole thing had to be shut down for actual repairs. Not my finest hour. Lydia laughed. A real laugh, not the polite approximation people offered when they were uncomfortable. The sound drew more glances from the surrounding tables. Ethan noticed a guy in an expensive tracksuit actually holding up his phone, screen angled in their direction. The wrongness he'd felt walking in intensified. That's either very brave or very reckless, Lydia said. My daughter would say both. She's 7 and has extremely strong opinions about my decision-making skills. Ethan relaxed slightly, finding his footing in the familiar territory of talking about Emma. Last week, I let her convince me that pancakes are a perfectly acceptable dinner. She presented a very compelling argument involving the food pyramid. Sounds like she's got you figured out. Completely. I'm basically just the tall person who drives and signs permission slips. She's the one actually running things. Lydia's smile grew more genuine. Single dad? 3 years now. Her mom is... Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. Living her own life. Somewhere else. It's complicated in the way that ends up being surprisingly simple. Just me and Emma now. That must be hard. Some days, but Emma makes it easy to know what matters. Ethan met her eyes directly. She's teaching me to be better than I thought I could be. Something shifted in Lydia's expression. A wall coming down, or maybe a test being passed. Before she could respond, a barista appeared at their table. Young woman with pink-streaked hair and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Can I get you folks started with something? Ethan glanced at the menu board above the counter, mentally calculating. Just coffee for me. Black, whatever's fresh. I'll have the lavender latte, Lydia said. And maybe, do you still have those lemon scones? We do? 2 of those, please. The barista nodded and departed. Ethan noticed she made a beeline for a table in the corner where 3 women sat, heads together like conspirators. When she reached them, she leaned in, whispered something. All 3 turned to look at him and Lydia, expressions ranging from anticipation to poorly concealed amusement. Ethan's jaw tightened. Do you know them? He asked quietly. Lydia followed his gaze, then shook her head. Should I? No, just... He stopped himself. Nothing. Sorry. But it wasn't nothing. The attention felt wrong, pointed, like they were performers in a play they hadn't auditioned for, and the audience was waiting for a specific scene. So Marcus set this up, Lydia said, drawing his attention back. How do you 2 know each other? High school. We played baseball together. Badly. Ethan wrapped his hands around the coffee cup the barista had delivered, grateful for something to hold. He went off to college, got a degree in business, started wearing ties. I stayed local, opened a shop, but we stayed friends. He's good people. He works with my company, Lydia said carefully. In sales. He's mentioned you a few times over the past month, said you were... She seemed to be weighing whether to continue. Someone worth meeting. That's generous of him. Most days I'm just a guy who smells like motor oil and knows too much about transmission fluid. I think you're underselling yourself. Years of practice. Lydia laughed again, and this time Ethan heard something else in it. Surprise. As if genuine enjoyment wasn't what she'd been expecting from this afternoon. The thought made something in his chest tighten with an anger he didn't fully understand yet. The lemon scones arrived. Lydia broke hers in half, steam rising from the tender interior, and Ethan did the same. For a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence, the kind that felt earned rather than awkward. Can I ask you something? Lydia's voice was quieter now, more serious. And you can tell me if I'm out of line. Sure. Did Marcus tell you about me before you came? Ethan considered the question, understanding its weight. He said your name was Lydia, that you were smart, accomplished, and deserved better than the dating pool was currently offering. That was it. Nothing else? Should there have been something else? Lydia held his gaze, searching for dishonesty and apparently not finding it. No, I suppose not. But there was relief in her voice, and underneath it, something like old pain. Ethan made a decision then, the same way he'd decided to stay when he first saw her by the window, based not on logic, but on the bone-deep certainty that some moments demanded you choose kindness over comfort. Look, he said, I don't know what you're used to, what experiences have taught you to expect, but I'm here because I wanted to meet someone new, someone interesting. The rest, he gestured vaguely at the chair, at her, at the space between them, doesn't change that. Lydia blinked, and for a moment Ethan thought he saw the shine of tears before she looked away, out the window again. When she turned back, her expression was composed, but something had changed, softened. Thank you, she said simply. Nothing to thank me for, just telling the truth. They fell back into conversation, easier now. Lydia asked about his shop, and Ethan found himself describing the small garage on the east side of town, 2 bays, equipment held together mostly by hope and strategic welding, a customer base built on word of mouth and fair prices. She seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about the business side, the challenges of competing with dealerships, the satisfaction of diagnosis and repair. There's something honest about it, Ethan explained. A car comes in broken, you figure out why, you fix it. Immediate cause and effect, no politics, no posturing, just problem and solution. You make it sound almost meditative. Some days it is. Other days it's just lying on your back in the cold, covered in grease, wondering why you didn't go to college. He grinned. But yeah, there's a piece to it, working with your hands, building something or bringing something back to life. I can understand that. What about you? What do you do? Lydia hesitated just for a fraction of a second. I work in tech. Management, mostly. Making sure projects stay on track, resources get allocated properly. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. A lot of coordination. A lot of people with strong opinions who need to move in the same direction. Herding cats. Exactly. She smiled. Very expensive, highly educated cats who all think they should be in charge. Ethan laughed. Sounds like you're good at it, though. The way you talk about it, there's confidence there. Some days. Other days, I'm just hoping nobody notices I'm making it up as I go. That's called being human. Is it? Lydia's expression turned wry. I thought it was called imposter syndrome. Same thing, different marketing. They talked about Emma then, and Ethan found himself sharing more than he'd intended, the way she'd handled her mother leaving with a resilience that broke his heart, how she'd recently announced she wanted to be either an astronaut or a baker when she grew up, because space is cool, but cookies are important. Lydia listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed she understood the weight of single parenthood, the particular exhaustion of being everything to someone so small. She sounds extraordinary, Lydia said. She is. She's teaching me things I didn't know I needed to learn. Like what? Ethan considered. That being different doesn't mean being less. That kindness isn't weakness. That showing up matters more than being perfect. He met Lydia's eyes. That the people who matter don't need you to be anything other than yourself. The words hung between them, and Ethan realized they'd shifted from talking about Emma to talking about something else entirely, something more immediate and fragile. Lydia opened her mouth to respond, but whatever she was going to say was interrupted by movement from the corner table. The 3 women were standing, gathering bags and phones. As they passed, one of them, blonde, expensively dressed, smile sharp as cut glass, paused. Well, she said, voice pitched to Carrie, this is going better than expected. Ethan looked up at her, confused. Excuse me? I said it's going well, better than we thought. She glanced at her companions, who were barely containing laughter. Usually they don't last 10 minutes. Something cold settled in Ethan's stomach. Usually who doesn't? The blonde's smile widened. Oh, you don't know? Marcus didn't tell you? She turned to Lydia, false sympathy dripping from every word. Sweetie, I'm so sorry. This must be mortifying for you again. Lydia had gone very still, her face carefully blank in a way that spoke of practice. I don't know what you're talking about. The setup, The blonde gestured vaguely at them both. Thing. Marcus thought it would be funny. A prank. You know, see how the small-town mechanic reacts when his blind date is... She paused, savoring the moment. Not what he expected. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Around the cafe, other patrons were watching now, some with their phones held up, recording. Ethan felt reality reshape itself. Everything he'd thought about the last half hour suddenly cast in a different, uglier light. Not a date, a test, a joke at both their expense. He looked at Lydia and saw her composure fracturing, saw the humiliation she was fighting to contain, the old pain that apparently this wasn't the first time she'd been someone's punchline. And underneath that, he saw her preparing to leave, to extract herself from this situation with whatever dignity she could salvage. Ethan made his choice. He turned back to the blonde, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, conversational, and absolutely cold. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You're telling me that someone I thought was a friend set up an elaborate prank where the joke was supposed to be what exactly? That I'd be uncomfortable? That I'd leave? The blonde's smile faltered slightly. It's not. It was just supposed to be funny. Marcus thought. I don't care what Marcus thought. Ethan stood slowly, and there was something in his posture, some combination of controlled anger and perfect stillness that made the blonde step back. I want to know what you thought, what the punchline was supposed to be. We just wanted to see what? His voice was still quiet, but it cut through the cafe's ambient noise like a blade. See if I was decent enough to stay? See if she was desperate enough to hope? What exactly were you filming? The blonde glanced at her phone, then back at him. Look, it's not personal. It's completely personal. You made it personal when you decided that someone's worth could be measured by how others react to them. When you decided that basic human dignity was negotiable for your entertainment. It was just a joke. No. Ethan's voice was harder now. A joke is something everyone laughs at. This is cruelty with an audience. And the fact that you can't tell the difference says everything about you and nothing about either of us. Silence had spread through the cafe. Even the jazz seemed to have quieted. The blonde and her friends looked uncertain now. The script flipped, their moment of triumph curdling into something else. Delete the videos, Ethan said. All of them, now. You can't tell us. I'm not telling you. I'm asking. And if basic decency isn't enough motivation, consider that filming someone without consent for mockery is a legal gray area at best. Consider that this cafe probably has security cameras. Consider that making someone a viral joke has consequences. He paused. Delete them. The women exchanged glances. The blonde's finger moved across her screen. Fine. Done. Happy? Not particularly. Ethan stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. You can go now. They left, dignity in tatters, their exit tracked by dozens of eyes. When the door closed behind them, Ethan turned back to the table where Lydia sat, still frozen, still fighting to maintain the composure that was clearly costing her everything. He sat back down. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm so sorry that happened, that they... He stopped, searching for words adequate to the moment. That people can be that cruel. Lydia was staring at him, eyes wide, something like shock written across her features. You stayed. Of course I stayed. But the whole thing was a prank. You could have just left. Everyone would have understood. I could have proven them right, Ethan said simply. I could have confirmed exactly what they expected. That kindness is conditional and dignity is negotiable. But that's not who I want to be. That's not who Emma is learning to be. He leaned forward slightly. And honestly, Lydia, I was enjoying talking to you. Why would I let their cruelty ruin something that was actually good? A tear tracked down Lydia's cheek, then another. She brushed at them impatiently, angry at herself for showing emotion, for breaking in front of someone who'd just defended her. "Hey," Ethan said gently. "It's okay. You're allowed to be upset. Anyone would be." Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe this time would be different. I thought Marcus was actually—" She stopped, shook her head. "I'm so tired of being someone's test, of having to prove I'm worth basic respect. You shouldn't have to prove anything. The fact that you do says everything about them and nothing about you." Lydia looked at him, really looked at him, and Ethan saw her taking his measure in a new way, not as a blind date or a prank victim, but as a person who'd chosen integrity when walking away would have been easier. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "Just a guy who fixes cars and raises his daughter and tries to do right when he can. Nothing special." "I think you're wrong about that." Ethan felt heat rise in his face. "I just did what anyone should do." "But they didn't. Everyone else in this cafe watched and waited for me to be humiliated. You're the only one who stood up." Lydia's voice was steadier now, though her eyes were still bright with tears. "That's not nothing, Ethan. That's everything." They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe around them slowly returning to its previous rhythms, though Ethan could still feel eyes on them, could sense phones being lowered, could hear whispered conversations starting up again. "I should probably leave," Lydia said finally. "Let you get back to your day. This whole thing was... I'm sorry you got dragged into this." "Don't apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." Ethan hesitated, then made another choice, this one feeling just as important as deciding to stay. "But if you're leaving because you want to, that's fine. If you're leaving because you think you should, because those people made you feel like you don't deserve to take up space, then I'd like you to stay. If you want to." "Why?" "Because I'd like to finish our conversation. Because that scone was actually pretty good, and I'm thinking about getting another, because..." He smiled, hoping she could see the sincerity in it. "Because I meant what I said before. I'm enjoying talking to you. The rest of it, all that noise, it doesn't change that." Lydia studied him for a long moment, and Ethan could see her warring with herself. Between the old defense mechanisms that said, retreat, protect yourself, don't give anyone the power to hurt you, and something newer, more fragile, that whispered maybe this time could be different. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll stay." They ordered more coffee, another round of scones, and they talked, really talked, the conversation flowing easier now that the pretense had been stripped away. Lydia told him about growing up in a small town not unlike his, about the accident in college that had changed everything, about rebuilding a life and an identity when the one you'd planned was suddenly impossible. "People assume it defines you," she said, "that everything you are and could be gets filtered through this one fact. They can't see past it to who you actually are. That's their failure, not yours. Intellectually, I know that, but it doesn't make it easier." Ethan understood. He told her about the divorce, about the whispers in a small town, about being the guy whose wife left him for someone with more money and fewer responsibilities, about the shame of failure, even when the failure wasn't entirely yours. "People love a narrative," he said. "They love being able to put you in a box, label it, understand you without effort. The truth is usually more complicated. Always more complicated." They discovered they both loved old movies, the kind with actual plots and character development. That they both found cooking therapeutic, though Lydia admitted her repertoire was limited to 5 dishes she'd perfected through repetition. That they both believed in the radical idea that kindness mattered more than success, though the world seemed determined to prove them wrong. "Emma would like you," Ethan said. "She has very strong opinions about people, and she'd approve of you." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that you're honest, that you don't pretend to be something you're not. She values authenticity." He grinned. "Also, you like lemon scones, which she considers a sign of good judgment." "Then I hope I get to meet her someday." The words hung between them, weighted with implication. This wasn't just a nice conversation anymore. It was the beginning of something, fragile and uncertain but real. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Emma's school. He answered, listened for a moment, then hung up with an apologetic smile. "I need to pick up Emma. Her after-school program ended early today." "Of course." Lydia began gathering her bag, and Ethan noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she was preparing for goodbye, for this to be a nice memory, but nothing more. Can I... He stopped himself, took a breath. Can I call you? I'd like to do this again. Maybe coffee somewhere less likely to involve hidden cameras and elaborate pranks. Lydia's smile was cautious but genuine. I'd like that. They exchanged numbers. Ethan walked her out to the accessible parking spot where her van waited, modified, efficient, a testament to adaptation and independence. She transferred smoothly, collapsing the wheelchair and storing it with practiced efficiency. Thank you, she said through the open window. For staying, for everything. Thank you for giving me the chance to, for not leaving when you had every right to. See you soon? Count on it. Ethan watched her drive away, then turned back to his truck. As he walked across the parking lot, his phone buzzed again. Marcus this time. He stared at the screen for a long moment, anger and betrayal warring in his chest, then made a decision. He answered. We need to talk, Ethan said, voice flat. Look, man, I can explain. Marcus sounded panicked, words tumbling over each other. It wasn't supposed to be mean. It was just supposed to be funny. The guys at work, they were talking about how I don't care about the guys at work. I care that you used me, that you used someone vulnerable for entertainment, that you thought so little of both of us that you turned a human interaction into a prank. Ethan, come on. I'm done, Marcus. Whatever friendship we had, whatever history we had, it doesn't survive this. You made a choice about who you want to be. I'm making a choice about who I want to spend time with, and it's not people who think cruelty is funny. You're overreacting. No, I'm finally reacting appropriately. Goodbye, Marcus. Ethan hung up, blocked the number, and stood for a moment in the parking lot, feeling the weight of burning a bridge that went back to teenage years, to shared dreams and late-night conversations, and the foundation of who he'd thought he was. But some bridges deserved to burn. Some connections weren't worth maintaining if they required you to compromise the person you'd become. He drove to Emma's school, arriving just as she bounded out of the building, backpack bouncing, face lit with the uncomplicated joy of 7 years old. Daddy! She threw herself at him and he caught her, lifting her up, breathing in the smell of apple shampoo and playground dust and everything that mattered. Hey, Bug, how was school? We learned about fractions and I get it now. It's just sharing, but with numbers. She leaned back in his arms, studying his face with her mother's eyes and his sense of intuition. Did something happen? You look different. Do I? Like you're thinking hard about something. Ethan set her down, took her hand, and walked toward the truck. I had an interesting day. Met someone new. A girl. Emma's voice was immediately invested, eyes wide. Like a girlfriend girl? Maybe, we'll see. Her name is Lydia, and she's very smart and very brave. Braver than you? Much braver than me. Emma considered this as Ethan lifted her into the truck, secured her seatbelt. Is she nice? Very nice. Then I approve. Emma nodded decisively. You should see her again. You smile more when you talk about nice people. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't always listen. Ethan laughed, kissed the top of her head, and pulled out of the parking lot. As he drove home, Emma chattered about fractions and her friend Sophie and the caterpillar they'd found at recess, and Ethan let her voice wash over him, grounding him in what mattered. But part of his mind was still at that cafe, still seeing Lydia's face when he'd chosen to stay, still feeling the rightness of that decision settling into his bones like truth. He didn't know yet that the cafe had security cameras, that the blonde and her friends hadn't deleted all the videos, that someone had already posted a clip of him confronting them, and that within hours it would start spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. He didn't know that Lydia Cross wasn't just someone who worked in tech management, but the CEO of a company with a market cap in the billions, that she wielded influence and power he couldn't imagine from his small-town garage. He didn't know that his life was about to change in ways that would test everything he believed about dignity, worth, and the price of doing right. But he knew, driving home with his daughter singing off-key in the back seat, that he'd made the right choice, that when the moment came to choose between comfort and integrity, he'd chosen what he could live with. what he could teach Emma to value. Everything else would follow from that. The truck turned onto their street, passing the garage where he spent his days, the small house where they'd rebuilt their lives. Ethan pulled into the driveway, helped Emma out, let her run ahead to unlock the door. And behind him, unnoticed, a notification appeared on his phone. A friend request from someone named Lydia Cross. A message. Thank you again for seeing me. For staying. I haven't felt that seen in a long time. Ethan saw it later, after dinner was made and dishes were washed, and Emma was in bed with a story half finished because she'd fallen asleep before the ending. He sat on the porch in the cooling evening, thumb hovering over the keyboard, trying to find words equal to what he felt. Finally, he typed, "Thank you for giving me the chance to do the right thing. I'd like to know you better, if you're willing to let me try." He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then set the phone down and looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the videos were spreading, the story was being retold, the world was making up its mind about a moment that belonged only to him and Lydia. But here, in the quiet of his porch, in the space between what had been and what might be, Ethan Brooks was just a man who'd chosen kindness when cruelty would have been easier, who'd stayed when leaving was expected, who'd seen another person's humanity and refused to look away. It was enough. For now, it was everything. The morning light hit Ethan's phone screen at 6:15, pulling him from a sleep that had been restless with the weight of yesterday's choices. Emma was still asleep down the hall, her breathing the soft rhythm that had become the soundtrack to his existence. He reached for the phone, expecting the usual notifications, weather alerts, spam emails, maybe a message from a customer about a timing belt. What he found instead was chaos. 47 missed calls, 312 text messages. His social media accounts, which he barely used, were flooded with notifications that had apparently been piling up since midnight. Ethan sat up, heart suddenly hammering, and clicked on the first message. It was from Danny, who worked at the parts store downtown. "Dude, you're everywhere. Check Twitter." Ethan didn't have Twitter. He opened his browser instead and typed his own name into the search bar. Not sure what he was looking for, but certain that whatever it was, it had arrived while he slept. The first result was a video, 42-second clip, already at 3 million views. The thumbnail showed him standing in the cafe, face set in controlled anger, the blonde woman backing away. The caption read, "Small town mechanic destroys entitled women trying to humiliate disabled woman on blind date." Ethan's stomach dropped. He clicked play. The video quality was grainy but clear enough. Someone had filmed from across the cafe, probably on their phone. It started mid-confrontation, with his voice cutting through the ambient noise. A joke is something everyone laughs at. This is cruelty with an audience. The comments were overwhelming, thousands of them scrolling past faster than he could read. Most were supportive, praising him for standing up, calling him a hero, demanding to know who he was, and if he was single. Others were analytical, dissecting the interaction frame by frame. A few were cruel, suggesting the whole thing was staged, that no one was actually that decent. And woven through all of it was one question, repeated again and again. Who is the woman in the wheelchair? Ethan closed the browser, hands shaking. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd just been trying to do the right thing, to shut down cruelty when he saw it. He hadn't wanted attention, hadn't wanted to become a story that strangers dissected over their morning coffee. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him click accept. "Mr. Brooks?" A woman's voice, professional, slightly harried. "This is Kelly Branson from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on the show to discuss yesterday's incident at the Meridian Cafe. Would you be available for a segment this week?" Ethan hung up without responding. The phone rang again immediately. Different number, same request. Then another, and another. By the time Emma padded into his room, rubbing sleep from her eyes and asking what all the noise was about, Ethan had turned his phone off entirely and was sitting on the edge of his bed, trying to understand how his life had fractured overnight. "Daddy?" Emma climbed onto the bed beside him, small hand finding his. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, Bug. Just..." He stopped, not sure how to explain this to a 7-year-old. "Remember yesterday when I told you I met someone new?" The brave lady, Lydia. Right. Well, something that happened when I met her. Some people filmed it and put it on the internet, and now a lot of people are talking about it. Emma's eyes widened. Are you famous? I don't think so. I hope not. Can I see? Ethan hesitated, then powered his phone back on and pulled up the video, muting it before handing it to Emma. She watched intently, face serious, then handed it back. You look angry, she observed. I was. Those women were being mean to Lydia. Good that you told them to stop. Miss Patterson says bullies only stop when someone stands up. Emma leaned against his shoulder. Are you in trouble? No, Bug, just lots of people want to talk about it, about what happened. Will you? Ethan thought about the phone calls, the requests, the sudden attention from a world that had never cared about him before. I don't think so. It's private between me and Lydia. Okay. Emma accepted this with the easy faith of childhood. Can we have pancakes? Absolutely. They went downstairs and Ethan tried to focus on the familiar ritual, mixing batter, heating the griddle, flipping golden circles while Emma set the table. But his mind kept circling back to the video, to the comments, to the question that had appeared over and over. Who is she? He needed to talk to Lydia, needed to make sure she knew about this, that she was okay with it. He defended her privacy in that cafe, but someone else had stolen it anyway, packaged it for consumption by millions of strangers. After breakfast, after Emma was settled with cartoons and he'd checked that the doors were locked against any reporters who might have figured out where he lived, Ethan called the number Lydia had given him. She answered on the second ring. Ethan? Just his name, but he could hear everything in it. Exhaustion, stress, something that might have been relief. You've seen it, he said. Hard to miss. My assistant called me at 5 this morning to ask if I was aware that I'd gone viral. Lydia's laugh was hollow. Apparently I'm a trending topic, again. I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was filming. I thought that you'd shut it down? You did. Those women deleted their videos, but you can't control everyone in a public space. She sighed, and Ethan heard the weight of experience in it. This isn't your fault, Ethan. This is just what happens when people decide your life is their entertainment. Are you okay? Honestly, I don't know yet. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. PR wants to schedule a call. The board is concerned about optics. My mother has sent 17 texts asking why she had to find out about my dating life from Facebook. She paused. But underneath all that noise, there's something else. Something better. What's that? The comments. Not all of them, but enough. People sharing their own stories. Talking about times they've been dismissed or mocked or treated as less than. Talking about how seeing someone stand up mattered to them. Her voice softened. What you did yesterday, it mattered to more people than just me. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, processing this. I didn't do it for them. I know. That's why it matters. They talked for another 20 minutes, voices finding the easy rhythm they'd discovered in the cafe. Lydia told him about the morning's chaos, the way her carefully controlled life had suddenly become public property. Ethan told her about the interview requests, the sudden scrutiny, the feeling of being exposed in ways he hadn't chosen. Do you regret it? Lydia asked quietly. Staying, standing up, all of it. Not even a little bit. Do you? No, just, I'm sorry you got dragged into this, into my world. It's complicated in ways that aren't fair. Lydia, Ethan's voice was firm. I'm a grown man who makes his own choices. I chose to stay. I chose to speak up. Whatever comes from that, I can handle it. Even if it gets worse, even then. He heard her exhale, tension releasing. Okay, thank you. For what? For not running. A lot of people would. I'm not a lot of people. No, you're really not. They made plans to talk later after the immediate chaos had settled. When Ethan hung up, he found Emma standing in the doorway, studying him with those too perceptive eyes. That was her? Emma said. Not a question. Yeah. She sounds nice on the phone, too. She is. Emma nodded, satisfied, and returned to her cartoons. Ethan stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, and tried to imagine what came next. But the future was shapeless, undefined, rushing toward him faster than he could prepare for. The garage phone rang mid-morning. Ethan almost ignored it. Saturday was supposed to be his day off, time with Emma before the work week started. But habit made him answer. Brooks Automotive. Mr. Brooks? This is Patricia Chen from the Downtown Business Association. We wanted to reach out about yesterday's incident. The woman's voice was warm, professional. The response has been overwhelming. People are asking about your garage, wanting to support local businesses that share your values. We thought you might appreciate a heads up that you're likely to see an increase in customer interest. Ethan frowned. I appreciate the call, but I'm not looking to capitalize on this. Of course not. But people want to support you anyway. We just wanted you to be prepared. She paused. And to offer assistance if you need it. Media training, PR support, that sort of thing. I don't think that's necessary. Well, if you change your mind, we're here. And Mr. Brooks, what you did, standing up like that, it reflects well on all of us. Thank you. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stared at the phone, unsettled by the idea that his private action had become public property, that strangers felt entitled to claim kinship with a moment that belonged to him and Lydia alone. By Sunday afternoon, the garage parking lot had become a pilgrimage site. Cars pulled in, drivers emerging with phones raised, taking pictures of the building like it was a landmark. Some knocked on the door asking if Ethan was available, if he'd pose for a photo. He stayed inside with Emma, curtains drawn, feeling besieged in his own space. This is weird, Emma announced, peering through the blinds at a group of teenagers posing in front of the garage sign. Why do they care so much? People like stories, Ethan said. They like being part of something they think is important. But it wasn't their story. No, it wasn't. Emma looked at him, worried. Will it stop? I hope so, Bug. Eventually. But he wasn't sure he believed it. Monday morning brought validation that the world had fundamentally shifted. Ethan opened the garage at 7, same as always, expecting the usual Monday rush, weekend breakdowns, routine maintenance, the comfortable rhythm of work he knew how to do. Instead, he found a line of cars stretching down the block. Ethan stood in the doorway, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips, staring at the impossible sight. 15 vehicles, maybe 20, engines idling, waiting for him to open. As he watched, more pulled up behind them. Danny arrived 10 minutes later, jaw dropping when he saw the crowd. Boss, what the hell? Apparently I'm popular, Ethan said dryly. This is insane. Yeah. They opened the bay doors and the flood began. First customer was a woman in her 60s, driving a Honda that clearly didn't need service. She handed Ethan her keys with trembling hands and said, I just wanted to meet you, to shake your hand. My granddaughter uses a wheelchair, and what you did, her voice cracked. Thank you. The second customer was a young man with a transmission problem he'd been putting off for months. Saw the video, figured if you're decent enough to stand up like that, you're decent enough to be honest about what my car needs. The third, fourth, fifth, they kept coming. A steady stream of people who'd driven across town, across the county, because a 42-second video had convinced them Ethan Brooks was worth their business. By noon, Ethan had 3 weeks of appointments booked solid. By closing time, it was 5 weeks. Danny was overwhelmed, scribbling names and phone numbers on every available surface, trying to keep track of the sudden influx. We can't keep up with this, Danny said as they locked up for the night. We need more mechanics, more space, more everything. Ethan leaned against the workbench, exhaustion settling into his bones. I know. This is good though, right? This is what every small business dreams of. Is it? Ethan looked around the garage. Oil-stained concrete, tools he'd collected over 15 years, equipment held together with hope and expertise. I didn't want this. I just wanted to fix cars and raise my daughter and live a quiet life. Well, that's not what you have anymore, Shay. Danny's voice was gentle. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Ethan didn't have an answer. That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet except for the old furnace's familiar rattle, Ethan's phone buzzed with a new message. Lydia. Can we talk? Not on the phone. In person. His pulse kicked up. When? Tomorrow night? I can come to you if that's easier. I know you have Emma. They arranged it. 7 o'clock, his place, after Emma's bedtime. Ethan spent the next day distracted, only half present for the parade of customers who treated him like a celebrity rather than a mechanic. His mind was on tomorrow, on what Lydia might want to discuss, on the weight he'd heard in her text message. Tuesday dragged. Wednesday raced. By the time 7 o'clock arrived, Ethan had cleaned the house twice, put Emma to bed early with promises of extra stories tomorrow, and was pacing the living room like a caged animal. Headlights swept across the window. Ethan took a breath, steadied himself, and opened the door. Lydia sat in her chair on his front porch, illuminated by the yellow glow of his porch light. She was dressed casually, jeans, soft sweater, hair pulled back, but there was tension in her shoulders that spoke of the weight she'd been carrying. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "Hey yourself." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I come in?" Of course. He held the door while she maneuvered inside, then followed her to the living room. She positioned herself by the window, and Ethan sat on the couch across from her, suddenly aware of how small his house was, how modest compared to the world she must inhabit. "Thank you for seeing me," Lydia said. "I know this last week has been intense," Ethan supplied. "That's one word for it." She took a breath. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you at the cafe, but I didn't because I wanted—" She stopped, started again. "I wasn't entirely honest about what I do." Ethan waited, giving her space. "I told you I work in tech. Management. That's true, but it's incomplete." Lydia met his eyes. "I'm a CEO. My company, Crosstech Solutions, we develop accessibility software and hardware. We're worth about $4 billion. I have 3,000 employees, offices in 12 countries, and a board that thinks I should have handlers for situations exactly like what happened at that cafe." The information settled over Ethan like snow, cold, transformative, changing the landscape of everything he thought he understood. "You're a CEO," he repeated slowly. "Yes. A billionaire CEO. Technically, the company is worth billions. I personally—" She waved a hand. "That's not the point. The point is that I knew, going into that cafe, that if things went badly, I had resources, protection, power." Her voice dropped. "You didn't. You were just a man showing up for a blind date, and you had no idea who I was or what defending me might cost you." Ethan processed this, fitting new information into old context. "And you're telling me now because?" "Because it matters. Because what comes next, if there is a next, you deserve to know what you're walking into." Lydia's hands twisted in her lap. "My life isn't normal, Ethan. It's board meetings and investor calls and security protocols. It's people who want things from me, who see me as a resource to be exploited. It's complicated and exhausting and sometimes lonely in ways I can't explain." "Okay." "Okay?" She looked at him confused. "That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say?" Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That I'm intimidated? That I'm only interested in you if you're just a woman who works in tech and not a woman who runs a company? That your success makes you less worthy of respect or kindness? I don't know. Most men—" "I'm not most men. You keep saying that, but I don't think you believe it yet." His voice was gentle but firm. "Lydia, I stayed in that cafe because I thought you deserved basic human dignity. Finding out you're successful doesn't change that. It just means you've built something remarkable while dealing with a world that probably told you that you couldn't." Tears welled in Lydia's eyes. "It's not going to be simple. Being with me. If that's something you want, there will be attention, scrutiny, people making assumptions. Your life will change. It already has." Ethan gestured at the window, at the world beyond. "That video changed everything. My garage is booked solid. Strangers know my name. Emma asked me yesterday if we're going to be on television. Nothing about my life is what it was 6 days ago. And you're okay with that?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." He stood, moved to crouch beside her chair so they were eye level. "But here's what I do know. I like talking to you. I like the way you think, the way you see the world. I like that underneath all the armor you've built, You're still brave enough to hope for connection. That matters more to me than what your job title is. You don't even know me. Not really. We had one date that turned into a disaster. Then let's have another one. A real one. Where nobody's filming and nobody's playing pranks. Just us, figuring out if this thing between us is real or just adrenaline from a shared crisis. Lydia searched his face, looking for doubt, for ulterior motives, for any sign that he was too good to be true. Why? Why are you willing to try when you know how complicated it's going to be? Because Emma's been asking about you every day. Because I keep thinking about things I want to tell you, stories I want to share. Because Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I've spent 3 years playing it safe, protecting myself and Emma from anything that might hurt. And maybe that kept us safe, but it also kept us small, kept us from growing into something bigger. And you think I'm worth the risk? I think we might be. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Lydia reached out, her hand finding his, and Ethan felt the tremor in her fingers, fear and hope tangled together. I'm scared, she whispered, of wanting this, of believing it could work. Me too. But maybe that's how you know it matters. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands clasped, breathing synchronized, two people standing at the edge of something neither could fully see. Then Lydia smiled, a real smile this time, luminous and unguarded. Okay, she said, let's try. The second date happened 3 days later at a small Italian restaurant on the edge of town, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and an owner who'd been serving the same 12 dishes for 30 years. Lydia arrived first, having insisted on meeting him there rather than being picked up. Maintaining the independence that Ethan was learning was central to who she was. He found her at a corner table, studying the menu with the same focused intensity she probably brought to board meetings and product launches. They have 17 different pasta dishes, she said as he sat down. That feels excessive. Mario doesn't believe in limiting options. His philosophy is that if someone wants it, he should make it. Ethan grinned. I've been coming here since I was a kid. The lasagna is legendary. Then lasagna it is. They ordered, and the conversation flowed easier this time, without the weight of viral videos and public scrutiny pressing down on them. Lydia told him about her week, about damage control meetings and PR strategies, and the delicate dance of managing public perception while refusing to apologize for existing. Ethan told her about the garage, about customers who'd become regulars overnight, about the strange experience of being recognized at the grocery store by people who felt they knew him because they'd seen 42 seconds of his life. It's invasive, Lydia said, that feeling of being known without being understood. How do you handle it? The constant attention, the scrutiny. Badly, most days. Better on others. She twirled pasta on her fork, thoughtful. I built walls. Professional distance, security protocols, a very small circle of people I actually trust. It's lonely sometimes, but it's safe. And now? Now I'm having dinner with someone who saw past all of that in about 10 minutes. It's terrifying. Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. For what it's worth, I'm terrified too. I have no idea what I'm doing. Emma keeps asking when you're going to meet her, and I don't know how to explain that I'm trying to figure out if this is real before I introduce you to the most important person in my life. That's smart, protective. It's also exhausting, trying to keep these parts of my life separate when all I want is... He stopped, surprised by his own honesty. What do you want? To see where this goes, to stop being careful and just be present. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. To introduce you to my daughter and watch her interrogate you about your favorite dinosaur because that's apparently how she measures character. Lydia laughed, the sound bright and unrestrained. I'm partial to Triceratops. Is that an acceptable answer? That's her favorite. You'll do fine. They lingered over tiramisu and coffee, talking until the restaurant began closing around them. Mario himself came out to say hello, greeting Ethan like family and treating Lydia with the casual warmth he extended to all his customers, never once acknowledging that he'd probably seen the video, probably knew exactly who she was. You bring her back, Mario told Ethan as they were leaving. Anyone who appreciates my lasagna is good people. In the parking lot, under the glow of streetlights and a waning moon, Lydia turned to Ethan. I had a good time. A normal, uncomplicated, good time. So did I. Can we do it again? Soon? How about Saturday? I'll cook. You can meet Emma. We'll keep it low-key. Lydia's smile was cautious but genuine. I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. Saturday arrived with the inevitability of important things, and Ethan found himself more nervous than he'd been in years. He cleaned the house until it gleamed, recruited Danny to check that everything was accessible, confirmed 3 times that Emma understood the importance of not overwhelming their guest with 1,000 questions in the first 5 minutes. I know, Daddy, Emma said, exasperated by the 4th reminder. Be polite. Don't stare. Ask about dinosaurs. Not immediately. After we say hello, then. That's better. Lydia arrived at 6, navigating the front path with practiced ease. Emma answered the door before Ethan could stop her, face bright with curiosity. Hi, I'm Emma, and you're Lydia, and Daddy says you're really smart, and I'm supposed to not ask too many questions right away. But I have a lot of them, so can we get the hello part over with fast? Lydia blinked, then burst out laughing. I think we can manage that. What's first? Do you like dinosaurs? Triceratops especially. Emma's eyes widened. That's my favorite. Did Daddy tell you to say that? He mentioned you were a fan, but I've always been partial to herbivores. They don't get enough credit for being tough. Right! Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. Everyone likes T-Rex, but Triceratops had those horns and that neck frill for protection, and they traveled in herds, which means they were smart about safety. Ethan watched them from the kitchen doorway, something warm and terrifying expanding in his chest. Lydia was taking Emma seriously, engaging with her ideas without condescension, treating her 7-year-old enthusiasm as worthy of respect. Emma, in turn, was lit up in a way he hadn't seen since before Sarah left, responding to genuine interest with the full force of her personality. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Emma dominated the conversation, asking about Lydia's job in terms she could understand, about whether being a CEO meant you got to tell everyone what to do or if you had to listen too. Lydia answered honestly, talking about responsibility and collaboration and the weight of decisions that affected thousands of lives. That sounds hard, Emma said solemnly. It is sometimes, but it's also rewarding, like when your dad fixes a car and the customer is so grateful because now they can get to work or take their kids to school. Except I'm helping make tools that let people who use wheelchairs or have other disabilities do things that might otherwise be difficult. Like what? Like software that lets people control computers with their eyes instead of their hands, or hardware that helps people who can't walk easily move around their homes independently. Things that make life more accessible. Emma considered this, fork poised over her spaghetti. Is that why you started your company? Because you use a wheelchair? Emma, Ethan warned gently. It's okay, Lydia said. Yes, that's part of it. I got hurt in college and suddenly everything was different. Buildings I'd walked into 100 times were impossible to access. Classes I needed were in rooms I couldn't reach. People treated me like I'd stopped being capable just because my body worked differently. She met Emma's eyes. I decided if the world wasn't going to be accessible, I'd help build tools to make it so. That's really cool. You're like a superhero, but for real life. I don't know about superhero, just someone trying to solve problems. Same thing, Emma declared with the certainty of youth. After dinner, Emma showed Lydia her room, proudly displaying her dinosaur collection and the solar system mobile Ethan had helped her hang from the ceiling. Lydia listened to explanations of each planet's unique characteristics, admired drawings from school, and somehow ended up sitting on the floor engaged in a complex game involving plastic stegosauruses and an imaginary meteor strike. Ethan leaned against the door frame watching and felt something shift and settle in his chest. This was what he'd been afraid of and hoping for simultaneously. The merging of his carefully separated worlds, the risk of Emma getting attached to someone who might not stay. But watching them together, seeing the easy warmth developing between them, he couldn't regret the risk. Some things were worth the possibility of pain. Bedtime, Bug, he said finally, noting the clock. You've kept Lydia hostage long enough. I wasn't a hostage. Lydia protested. I was having fun. Really? Emma looked at her skeptically. Because grown-ups usually just pretend to like kid stuff. Not this grown-up. Dinosaurs are objectively fascinating. Lydia held out her hand for a high five, which Emma delivered enthusiastically. Thanks for showing me your room. You can come back anytime. We can play more, or I can show you my rock collection, or we can watch nature documentaries because Daddy says I have to expand my interests beyond just dinosaurs. Sounds like a plan. Ethan got Emma through her bedtime routine, fielding questions about Lydia between toothbrushing and pajama wrestling. By the time she was tucked in, stories read, and nightlight on, his daughter was fighting sleep with the determination of someone who didn't want to miss anything. I like her, Emma murmured, eyes already closing. She's nice and she doesn't talk to me like I'm dumb. She's pretty great, Ethan agreed. Are you going to marry her? The question landed like a stone in still water. That's moving pretty fast, don't you think? Maybe, but you smile different when she's here, like you did before Mommy left. Ethan's throat tightened. That's because she makes me happy. But happiness doesn't always mean marriage, Bug. Sometimes it just means enjoying someone's company. Okay, but if you did marry her, I wouldn't mind. She was asleep before he could respond, leaving him sitting on the edge of her bed with his daughter's permission for a future he hadn't dared to imagine yet. Downstairs, Lydia was on the couch, looking at the photos on the wall. Ethan and Emma through the years, marking time through birthday parties and school events and quiet moments captured in film. She's wonderful, Lydia said as Ethan joined her. Smart, curious, completely herself. You've done an incredible job with her. Most days I'm just trying not to screw up too badly. She makes it easy by being fundamentally good. She gets that from you. Ethan shook his head. I don't know about that. I'm just what? Lydia turned to face him. Just a man who stands up to bullies, who builds a business on integrity, who raises a daughter to be curious and kind. You're allowed to take credit for that, Ethan. It doesn't feel like enough sometimes. Like I should be giving her more. A bigger house, better opportunities, a mother who actually wanted to be here. You're giving her something more valuable than any of that. You're giving her a father who shows up, who loves her unconditionally, who teaches her that people's worth isn't measured by their circumstances. Lydia's voice was soft but fierce. Trust me, that matters more than you know. They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, breathing synchronized. Then Ethan spoke, the words spilling out before he could second-guess them. Emma asked if I was going to marry you. Lydia went very still. That's direct. She has opinions about my love life. Strong ones, apparently. He laughed shakily. I told her we're taking things slow, but honestly, Lydia, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be casual about something that feels this significant. What are you saying? I'm saying that I can see this going somewhere, that I want it to, that Emma's not the only one hoping you'll stick around. Lydia turned to him, eyes shining. I want that too. More than I've wanted anything in a long time. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. My life is complicated. There are things coming that you don't know about yet. Things that might change how you feel. Like what? She took a breath, seemed to be weighing something. There's going to be a situation at my company, soon. Something I've been working toward for months. And when it happens, you'll be connected to it by association. The attention you've gotten from the cafe video, that'll seem minor in comparison. Ethan studied her face, seeing the tension there. You're being deliberately vague, because I can't talk about it yet, not in detail, but I need you to trust that I'm trying to protect you and Emma, that I wouldn't bring this into your lives if there was any other way. Does this have to do with the cafe? With what happened? In a way, that video, it didn't just go viral because people liked seeing someone stand up for what's right. It went viral because it touched something bigger, a conversation about dignity, accessibility, the way we treat people who are different. She met his eyes. I'm going to use that platform to make changes that should have been made years ago. And it's going to be messy. Ethan processed this, fitting pieces together. And you're warning me because you want me to have the option to walk away before it gets worse. I'm warning you because you deserve to make an informed choice, because Emma deserves a father who understands the risks. Here's what I understand, Ethan said slowly. You're about to do something important, something that matters. And you're scared I'll run because it might be uncomfortable for me. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm not running, Lydia. Whatever's coming, we'll figure it out together. You don't know what you're promising. Then tell me. Whatever it is, just tell me. Lydia looked at him for a long moment, then made a decision. The cafe incident. It wasn't the first time someone's tried to humiliate me. It wasn't even the worst. I've dealt with discrimination, with people who think my disability makes me less capable, with assumptions and barriers and casual cruelty for years. I know that must be... Let me finish, please. She took a breath. Marcus, the friend who set up that date? He works in my sales department, has for 3 years. And for 3 years he's been part of a culture at my company that I've been trying to change. Ableism, subtle and not so subtle. Comments, jokes, assumptions that people with disabilities are less valuable employees. Ethan's jaw tightened. And the prank was his way of testing me, of seeing if I'd be humiliated enough to back down from the changes I've been pushing for. He thought if he could make me look desperate, vulnerable, it would undermine my authority. Her voice hardened. What he didn't count on was you. Was someone actually treating me like a person instead of a punchline? So what are you going to do? I'm going to clean house. Marcus and everyone who participated in that prank, everyone who's perpetuated that culture, they're done. But more than that, I'm going to make CrossTech a model for accessibility in corporate America. Mandatory training, accountability measures, a complete restructuring of how we hire and promote people with disabilities. She looked at him intently. It's going to be public. It's going to be controversial. People are going to have opinions about whether I'm overreacting, whether I'm using my personal experience to drive company policy. Let them. You're the CEO. You get to decide what kind of company you run. And when they come after me, they'll come after you too. They'll dig into your life, your past, looking for anything they can use. They'll scrutinize how you raise Emma, whether you're a good enough father, whether our relationship is real, or some kind of PR stunt. Her voice dropped. I need you to know what you're walking into. Ethan stood, paced to the window, stared out at the quiet street. Behind him, he could hear Lydia's breathing, could feel her waiting for his response. Everything she'd said was true. His life was about to get infinitely more complicated. Emma's life, too. They'd be exposed to scrutiny and judgment from people who knew nothing about them but felt entitled to opinions anyway. He thought about Marcus, about someone who'd been his friend using that friendship as a weapon. About the cruelty of that cafe prank, the assumption that humiliation was entertainment. About every person who'd ever looked at Lydia and seen only her wheelchair instead of her competence, her brilliance, her worth. He turned back to her. Do it. Clean house, restructure the company, make all the changes you've been planning, and when people come after you, when they try to tear you down for having the audacity to demand better, I'll be right there. Not because I'm some white knight, but because what you're doing matters. Because Emma's going to grow up in the world you're helping to build, and I want it to be better than the one we have now. Lydia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're sure? I'm sure. About you, about this, about all of it. She reached for him, and Ethan closed the distance between them, pulling her close. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet of his living room, two people choosing to face whatever came next together rather than apart. When? Ethan asked finally. When does this all happen? Monday. There's a board meeting. I'm presenting my plan and I'm not asking for permission. If they don't like it, I'll remind them that I own controlling interest and this is happening whether they approve or not. That's 2 days away. I know, I should have told you sooner, but I wanted... She stopped, started again. I wanted a few normal moments first. Dinner at a restaurant, meeting Emma, feeling like this was real and not just crisis response. It is real. Whatever happens Monday doesn't change that. They talked until midnight, Lydia walking him through her plans, the scope of changes she was implementing, the people she'd be holding accountable. Ethan listened, asked questions, offered support where he could. Somewhere in the conversation, they'd moved closer together, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. I should go, Lydia said finally, though she made no move to leave. Let you get some sleep before the storm hits. Or you could stay. Guest rooms made up. Emma would be thrilled to have breakfast with you tomorrow. Are you sure? I'm sure. Lydia stayed. Ethan set her up in the spare room, brought her towels and an extra blanket, made sure she had everything she needed. They said goodnight in the hallway, and the moment felt weighted with significance. Not just the physical proximity, but the emotional intimacy they'd built over the past 2 weeks. Thank you, Lydia said softly. For not running, for staying, even when you knew it would be hard. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me, for bringing me into your world even when it would have been easier to keep me at a distance. They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to break the connection. Then Lydia reached up, her hand cupping his cheek, and kissed him, soft, sweet, full of promise and possibility, and the beginning of something neither of them had quite expected to find. When she pulled back, Ethan was smiling. So we're doing this. We're doing this. Good, because Emma's going to be impossible tomorrow, demanding to know when you're coming back. Tell her soon. Tell her as often as she wants. Sunday was perfect in the way that days before storms always are, bright and clear and deceptively calm. Emma woke up delighted to find Lydia still there, immediately recruiting her for pancake making and dinosaur documentaries. They spent the morning in easy domesticity, the three of them moving around the kitchen and living room with the comfort of people who fit together naturally. Ethan watched them from the doorway while coffee brewed, Emma explaining the finer points of velociraptors, while Lydia flipped pancakes with the concentration of someone determined to get it right. His daughter was already attached. He could see it in the way she gravitated toward Lydia, in the casual touches and ready laughter. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right. After breakfast, Lydia reluctantly left, citing work she needed to review before Monday's meeting. Emma extracted promises of future visits, then disappeared to her room to draw what she described as a scientifically accurate portrait of a triceratops for Lydia. Ethan walked Lydia to her van, hands in his pockets against the morning chill. You ready for tomorrow? As ready as I'll ever be. I've been preparing for this for months. Now I just have to follow through. You will. You're the most determined person I've ever met. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of the professional consequences. I can handle that. But of dragging you and Emma into something that might get ugly. We're already in it. Might as well be all the way in. He leaned against the van, looking at her seriously. I mean it, Lydia. Whatever comes, we can handle it, as long as we're honest with each other. Deal. She started the engine, then paused. Ethan, I think I'm falling for you, both of you, and that's terrifying. Yeah, it is, he smiled. But the best things usually are. He watched her drive away, then turned back to the house where Emma was probably already planning their next adventure with Lydia. The garage would open in an hour, customers would arrive expecting miracles from the viral video mechanic, and somewhere across town Lydia was preparing to dismantle the culture that had tried to diminish her. Tomorrow, everything would change again. But today, standing in the morning sun with the memory of Lydia's kiss still warm on his lips and his daughter's laughter drifting from the house, Ethan Brooks felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, substantial, dangerous hope that the future might hold something better than he'd dared to imagine. He went inside to find Emma, to tell her that yes, Lydia would be back soon, and to prepare for whatever Monday would bring. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Ethan was under a Honda Civic, hands deep in an oil change that should have been routine but felt surreal given everything else happening in his life, when Danny burst into the garage with his phone held high like a torch. Boss, you need to see this. Ethan rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag already stained beyond redemption. What now? Crosstech just dropped a statement. It's everywhere. Danny thrust the phone at him, and Ethan found himself staring at a press release that had gone live 20 minutes ago. The headline was simple and devastating. Crosstech CEO announces major corporate restructuring following discrimination incident. Ethan's stomach dropped as he read. Lydia hadn't just cleaned house, she'd demolished it. Marcus Chen and 7 other employees terminated for creating a hostile work environment. A new chief diversity officer position created and filled. Mandatory accessibility training for all staff. A $10 million fund established to support disability advocacy organizations. and at the center of it all, a detailed account of the cafe incident, carefully worded but unmistakable in its implications. She really did it, Danny breathed. She actually burned it all down. Ethan kept reading. The statement included quotes from Lydia, measured but fierce, talking about corporate responsibility and the cost of looking away. It mentioned the viral video without naming him directly, but anyone who'd seen it would make the connection instantly. And at the bottom, a line that made his breath catch. This company will be a place where dignity is non-negotiable, where accessibility is foundational, and where every employee, regardless of ability, is valued for their contributions, not judged by their differences. Your phone's been ringing non-stop, Danny said. I didn't want to bother you, but it's been like 15 different numbers in the last 10 minutes. Ethan pulled his own phone from his pocket and found exactly what he'd expected. A flood of calls from media outlets, from numbers he didn't recognize, from people who wanted statements and reactions, and pieces of a story that was no longer just about a cafe confrontation, but about corporate accountability and systemic change. He ignored all of them and dialed the one number that mattered. Lydia answered on the first ring, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. You saw it. I saw it. Are you okay? I don't know yet. The board meeting was... She paused, and he could hear voices in the background, the bustle of activity. Contentious. 3 board members called for my resignation. I reminded them I control 51% of voting shares and they can resign if they don't like my decisions. And did they? 2 of them. I'll have their replacements by end of day. Her voice softened. Ethan, I'm sorry. I know this puts you back in the spotlight. Your name's not in the statement, but people are already connecting the dots. I knew this was coming. We talked about it, remember? Talking about it and living it are different things. Then I guess we're both learning. He could hear Danny fielding a phone call in the office, his voice polite but firm in declining comment. How bad is it going to get? Bad. Marcus is threatening a lawsuit. Several other terminated employees are claiming wrongful termination. My PR team is fielding hundreds of media requests, and the think pieces... She laughed without humor. Everyone suddenly has opinions about whether I'm being too harsh or not harsh enough, whether this is genuine reform or performative activism. What do you need from me? The question seemed to surprise her. What do I need? Yeah, how can I help? What would make this easier for you? Lydia was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Just keep being you. Keep showing up. Keep reminding me why I'm doing this. I can do that. We both can. Emma's already planning your next visit, by the way. Something involving a science project and possibly glitter. I'm terrified. That got a real laugh. Tell her I wouldn't miss it. They talked for a few more minutes, Lydia filling him in on the logistics of the restructuring, the timeline for implementation, the interviews she'd agreed to do. When they finally hung up, Ethan stood in the garage bay holding his phone and trying to process the fact that his life had just become permanently entangled with corporate policy and social movements and forces he'd never imagined encountering. The rest of Monday was chaos. News vans appeared outside the garage by noon, reporters hoping for comments from the man who'd inadvertently sparked a corporate revolution. Ethan declined every request, directing them to official statements from Crosstech and closing the bay doors when they became too persistent. Customers who'd come for oil changes and tire rotations found themselves navigating a media circus. Some annoyed by the disruption, others thrilled to be adjacent to the story. By the time Ethan picked Emma up from school, the story had evolved. Op-eds were appearing in major newspapers. Disability advocates were praising Lydia's actions while corporate consultants questioned the wisdom of such dramatic restructuring. Social media was predictably divided, with some celebrating the accountability and others accusing Lydia of overreaction. Emma climbed into the truck, backpack slung over one shoulder, and immediately asked, "Is Lydia in trouble?" Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "Where did you hear that?" Sophie's mom was talking about it at pickup. She said Lydia fired a bunch of people and now everyone's mad. Emma's face was worried, the same expression she'd worn when explaining her mother's absence to friends. "Is she okay?" "She's fine, Bug. She's making some changes at her company, important changes. And sometimes when you do the right thing, people get upset about it." "Because the right thing is hard?" because the right thing often means people have to face consequences they'd rather avoid. Emma processed this, chewing her bottom lip the way she did when thinking deeply. The people she fired, were they the ones from the cafe? The mean ones? Some of them. Good. They deserved it. Her voice was fierce, protective. Nobody should be mean to Lydia. She's nice and she makes you smile and she knows about dinosaurs. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, pride in his daughter's instinct for justice, fear of what this exposure might cost her, love for the way she'd already claimed Lydia as worth defending. She'd appreciate you saying that. Can I call her? I want to tell her it's okay that people are mad because she did the right thing, and that's what matters. Let's wait until tonight. She's probably really busy right now. But Emma's words stayed with him through the afternoon, through the customers who wanted to talk about corporate responsibility more than their transmission problems, through the moment when Danny pulled him aside and asked seriously whether they needed to hire security. It's getting weird, boss. People showing up just to take pictures. That guy this morning who wanted to know if you were planning to sue Crosstech for emotional distress. The woman who tried to get me to confirm whether you and Lydia are actually dating, or if it's just good PR. Danny looked worried. This is beyond what we can handle ourselves. I'll talk to Lydia. She must have people who deal with this kind of thing. That night, after Emma was in bed and the house was finally quiet, Ethan's phone rang with a FaceTime call. Lydia appeared on the screen, exhausted but relieved, hair pulled back and office lights harsh behind her. Hey, she said. Survived day one. Barely, from the look of it. You okay? Tired, angry, satisfied. She rubbed her eyes. It's done, Ethan. The people who made my company unsafe for employees with disabilities are gone. The ones who thought pranking someone on a date was funny, who perpetuated a culture of casual cruelty, they don't work for me anymore. And the fallout? Extensive. Legal's preparing for multiple lawsuits. PR is managing the narrative. I've got interviews scheduled for the rest of the week with outlets that actually care about accessibility issues rather than just drama. She looked directly at the camera. But I'd do it again, every single part of it. Good. You should. Ethan settled back on the couch. Emma wants to talk to you, by the way. She heard people discussing it at school pickup and appointed herself your defender. Lydia's expression softened. She's remarkable. She gets it from her father, Ethan said with a grin, echoing Lydia's words from days before. They talked until Lydia's assistant knocked on her office door, reminding her of a call with the new chief diversity officer. After hanging up, Ethan sat in the quiet of his living room and tried to imagine the next few weeks, the next few months. More attention, more scrutiny, more people thinking they had a right to opinions about his life and choices. But underneath the apprehension was something steadier, the certainty that Lydia had done what needed doing, that integrity mattered more than comfort, that some battles were worth fighting even when the cost was high. The week unfolded in a blur of interviews and think pieces and hot takes. Lydia appeared on morning shows, giving measured but passionate explanations of her decisions. The cafe video resurged, analyzed frame by people who suddenly understood it as the catalyst for corporate accountability. Ethan's garage became a landmark, people driving past slowly with phones raised, the mechanic who'd sparked a movement through simple decency. By Friday, Ethan had stopped reading the comments. They ranged from supportive to vicious, with everything in between. Speculation about his relationship with Lydia, questions about his qualifications to date a CEO, think pieces about class and disability, and whether their relationship was performative or genuine. None of it mattered as much as the reality of their conversations, the late-night FaceTimes when Lydia was exhausted but determined, the way Emma asked about her every day with casual expectation that she was now part of their lives. Saturday brought relief in the form of normalcy. Lydia arrived at noon, having cleared her schedule of everything except spending time with the people who'd somehow become essential in 3 weeks. Emma met her at the door with a detailed itinerary involving the Science Museum, lunch at the diner, and an evening movie marathon. I have plans, Emma announced. Important plans. You have to come with us. I wouldn't dream of missing it, Lydia said seriously, and Emma beamed. The Science Museum was everything Emma had promised. Interactive exhibits on everything from dinosaurs to space exploration to the human body. Emma dragged them from display to display. her enthusiasm infectious, her questions endless. Lydia engaged fully, asking her own questions, encouraging Emma's curiosity, treating her observations as valuable contributions. Ethan watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd arrived in his life through a setup designed to humiliate them both, and felt the future reshaping itself around this new configuration. Family wasn't just him and Emma anymore. It was expanding to include someone who saw them both clearly and chose them anyway. At lunch, while Emma was distracted by the jukebox, Lydia reached across the table and took Ethan's hand. "Thank you for this, for letting me be part of your world. Thank you for wanting to be, for not deciding we're too complicated or too much work. You're not work, Ethan. You're—" She paused, searching for words. "You're the first real thing I've had in years. You and Emma both. Everything else in my life is negotiations and strategy and maintaining appearances. But this—" She gestured between them, encompassing the diner and Emma and the life they were building. "This is just real." "It is," he agreed. "Messy in public and more complicated than either of us planned, but real. I can work with real." That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep during the second movie, curled against Lydia's side like she belonged there, Ethan carried her upstairs while Lydia waited in the living room. When he came back down, Lydia had moved to the couch, looking small and vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed. "She's asleep before the hero's journey even starts," Ethan said, settling beside her. "Every time." "She had a big day." Lydia leaned into him, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, feeling her relax against him. "Thank you for today. I needed it more than I knew." "Rough week?" "Beyond rough, but productive. We've already got applications for the new positions. The accessibility audit of our headquarters building revealed dozens of issues we're fixing immediately. The training program starts Monday." She was quiet for a moment. "And I keep seeing comments from people, employees at other companies, people with disabilities who face discrimination, saying that watching me take action gave them courage to speak up too. That's incredible. It's terrifying. I never wanted to be a symbol or a movement. I just wanted to run my company according to my values. Sometimes the personal becomes political whether we want it to or not." Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. "But you're handling it. Better than handling it, you're changing things. We're changing things. You started this, remember? By staying when everyone expected you to leave. I'm pretty sure you finished it by actually holding people accountable." Team effort, then. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that felt earned rather than awkward. Then Lydia spoke, her voice tentative in a way it rarely was. "Ethan, where do you see this going? Us, I mean. Because I need to know, is this just something nice we're trying out, or are we building towards something more permanent?" He'd been expecting this question, or something like it. The intensity of the past few weeks had compressed what might normally take months into a handful of days. They'd been forced to make decisions about trust and commitment faster than either would have chosen. "Honestly, I can see this going as far as we're willing to take it. I can see Emma with a mother figure who actually shows up. I can see us building something that matters. Not just a relationship, but a life." He turned to face her fully. "What I can't see is walking away. Not now, not after seeing how well you fit with us." Lydia's eyes were bright. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize that dating me means constant attention and scrutiny and complications. For Emma to decide I'm not worth the disruption to your lives. Emma thinks you're the best thing to happen to us since the discovery of chicken nuggets, and I—" He took a breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Lydia. Have been since you laughed at my carnival ride story and looked at me like I was worth knowing. So if you're asking whether I'm in this, the answer is yes, completely." She kissed him then, deep and honest and full of everything she couldn't quite say yet. When they broke apart, she was smiling through tears. "I love you too, both of you, and that's absolutely terrifying because I've spent years protecting myself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. Good thing you're brave then. Good thing I've got you to be brave with." They stayed on the couch long after the credits rolled on the forgotten movie, talking about the future in concrete terms now. How they'd navigate their very different worlds, what it would look like to merge their lives more fully. When Lydia might meet Ethan's parents, and when he might navigate the corporate events that came with dating a CEO. It was practical and romantic simultaneously, planning a life while acknowledging the obstacles they'd face. "My mother's going to love you," Ethan said at one point. "She's been on my case for years about finding someone who challenges me intellectually. You're going to be her favorite instantly." "What about your dad?" "He'll want to know if you can fish. It's his measure of character." "I can't fish." "We'll work on it. It's basically just sitting quietly by water anyway. Emma and I can teach you." Lydia laughed, the sound light and unguarded. "A family of fishers? Never thought that would be my life." "Is it though? Your life, I mean. Are we?" She looked at him, steady and certain. "Yeah, you are. You absolutely are." The weekend ended too quickly, as good things always do. Sunday brought the reality of Monday looming, of returning to their separate worlds while trying to maintain the connection they'd built. Lydia left after dinner, after helping Emma with homework and listening to Ethan's plans for the garage expansion Danny kept pushing for. "Next weekend?" Emma asked at the door, not quite begging, but close. "Next weekend," Lydia confirmed. "Maybe we can work on that science project you mentioned." "The volcano one?" "Definitely the volcano one." Ethan walked her to the van, hands in pockets against the evening chill. "Thank you for being here, for showing up even when I'm sure you had 100 other demands on your time. There's nowhere else I want to be. No one else I want to spend my weekends with." She cupped his face, thumb tracing his cheekbone. "We're going to make this work, Ethan. Whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her one more time before letting her go. Monday brought the call Ethan had been half expecting and fully dreading. It came mid-morning while he was elbow deep in an engine repair, and the number on the screen was unfamiliar but official-looking. "Brooks Automotive." "Mr. Brooks, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Downtown Development Corporation. I'm calling about an opportunity we think might interest you." Ethan straightened, wiping grease from his hands. "What kind of opportunity?" "We've been following your story, the cafe incident and its aftermath. The attention your garage has received has been remarkable, and we think there's potential to expand your operation significantly. We're prepared to offer very favorable financing for a larger facility, more equipment, additional staff. A chance to grow your business beyond what you've built here." It should have been exciting. It should have felt like validation, like success. Instead, it felt like something else, like people trying to capitalize on attention that had never been about business in the first place. "That's generous," Ethan said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm looking to expand right now." "Mr. Brooks, opportunities like this don't come along often. With the right positioning, you could turn this garage into a regional chain. The Brooks name has real value right now. We'd be foolish not to leverage it." There it was. The thing that had been bothering him crystallized into words. They didn't want to help him expand because he was a good mechanic who'd built a solid reputation. They wanted to leverage his name, his story, the viral moment that had made him briefly famous. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to decline. This garage works for me and my customers the way it is. I'm not interested in building an empire." "Are you sure? We're talking about significant capital investment, prime locations." "I'm sure. Thank you for thinking of me, but the answer's no." He hung up and stood for a moment in the quiet of the garage, thinking about choices and values and what kind of life he wanted to build. Not empire, he realized, just something honest and sustainable and true to who he was. Danny appeared from the office. "Was that the development people?" "Yeah. Wanted to help me expand into a chain." "And you said?" "No." Danny studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. This place works because it's yours, because people trust you to be straight with them, not because you're some viral video celebrity." "Exactly. But saying no to one opportunity didn't stop others from coming. By week's end, Ethan had declined 3 separate business proposals, 2 book deals, and an invitation to speak at a conference about disability awareness that he felt completely unqualified to address. Each refusal felt right, felt like protecting something essential about who he was and why he'd done what he'd done in that cafe. Lydia understood in a way few others could. "They want to own the moment," she said during one of their nightly calls. "To package it and sell it and profit from it. But the moment wasn't about them. It was about choosing integrity when choosing cruelty would have been easier." Exactly. And I can't figure out how to explain that without sounding self-righteous. You don't have to explain it. You just have to keep living it. The second week after the restructuring announcement brought the lawsuits Lydia had predicted. Marcus Chen filed first, claiming wrongful termination and defamation. 3 other former employees followed with similar claims. The legal documents were public record, and media outlets dissected them gleefully, turning corporate accountability into entertainment. Ethan found himself named in the filings, not as a defendant, but as evidence. Marcus's lawyers argued that Lydia had overreacted to a harmless prank, that her response was disproportionate, that she'd allowed her personal feelings about Ethan Brooks to cloud her professional judgment. It's garbage, Lydia said when they talked about it. Standard legal strategy, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. My lawyers aren't worried. But are you worried? About the lawsuits? No. About what this cost you and Emma, constantly. We're fine, Lydia. We chose this, remember? Both of us. I know, but choosing it doesn't make it easier. Emma, for her part, seemed to take the continued attention in stride with the resilience of youth. She announced to her class that her dad's friend was a CEO who was making the world better, and fielded questions about whether that meant they were rich now, with 7-year-old logic. Lydia has a lot of money, she explained to Sophie during a playdate Ethan overheard. But Daddy says that's not why he likes her. He likes her because she's kind and smart, and she lets me show her my rocks without being bored. Does she have a big house? Sophie asked. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but probably. CEOs usually have big houses on TV. Are you going to live there? Emma was quiet for a moment. Maybe someday? If Daddy marries her. But I like our house too. It has my room and all my stuff. Ethan retreated to the kitchen, heart full of too many emotions to name. Emma was already imagining a future that included Lydia permanently, was already working through the logistics of blended families with the practical mindset that made her uniquely herself. That Friday, Lydia arrived with news that shifted everything again. She walked into the garage where Ethan was finishing up with a customer, waited patiently while he processed the payment, then followed him into the office. I need to tell you something, she said without preamble. Something good, but also complicated. Ethan leaned against his desk. Okay. The restructuring, it's working better than I hoped. The new training program is getting incredible feedback. We've already seen a measurable increase in employee satisfaction scores. The accessibility audit led to changes that are making the workplace better for everyone, not just people with disabilities. She was smiling, genuinely happy. And the best part, 3 competitors have reached out asking about our training materials. They want to implement similar programs. That's incredible, Lydia. It is. It means the cafe incident, as horrible as it was, led to actual systemic change. Not just at Crosstech, but potentially across the industry. She took a breath. But there's more. I've been asked to testify before a Senate committee about workplace accessibility. They're considering new legislation, and they want to hear from someone who's actually implementing these changes. Ethan processed this. When? 3 weeks. In Washington. It's a huge opportunity to influence policy at a federal level. Then you have to do it. I want you there. You and Emma both. I know it's a big ask, taking time away from the garage, disrupting Emma's school, but She looked at him intensely. I need you there. Not for show, not for optics. Just because you've been part of this from the beginning, and I want you there for what might be the most important moment of my professional life. Ethan didn't hesitate. We'll be there. Whatever you need. Lydia's relief was visible. Thank you. Thank you for not making me do this alone. You're not alone. Not anymore. That's what this is, remember? We're building something together. She kissed him then, deep and grateful, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come from that cafe, from the cruel setup that had somehow led to this, a relationship built on trust and shared values and the determination to show up for each other even when it was hard. 3 weeks felt simultaneously too long and too short to prepare for Washington, for Senate committees and federal legislation, and the next chapter of a story that had started with a simple choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. But as Ethan held Lydia in the quiet of his office, Listening to Danny handle the garage outside and knowing Emma was home with her homework probably half finished, he felt ready for whatever came next. They'd faced viral videos and corporate restructuring and lawsuits and public scrutiny. They'd figure out Senate testimony too, together. The flight to Washington left at 6 in the morning, which meant Emma was awake at 4:30, too excited to sleep and vibrating with questions about airplanes and the Capitol and whether she'd get to see the dinosaur exhibits at the Smithsonian. Ethan packed their bags while she talked, checking off mental lists and trying not to think about the fact that in less than 24 hours, Lydia would be testifying before Congress about policies that could affect millions of people. Lydia met them at the airport, looking polished and professional in a way that still caught Ethan off guard sometimes. The CEO version of the woman who'd laughed at his carnival ride story and played dinosaurs on Emma's bedroom floor. She'd arranged first-class tickets, which Emma announced was fancy but kind of boring because the seats are just bigger, with 7-year-old pragmatism. The flight was smooth, Emma's nose pressed to the window for most of it, cataloging clouds and landscape features with the detailed observation she brought to everything. Lydia worked on her tablet, reviewing testimony notes and responding to emails, but her free hand found Ethan's halfway through, fingers lacing together in silent solidarity. "Nervous?" he asked quietly. "Terrified, but ready." "You're going to be incredible. You know this stuff better than anyone." Knowing it and articulating it under questioning are different things. She glanced at Emma, then back at him. "Thank you for being here, for bringing her. It helps more than you know. Where else would we be?" The hotel was downtown, sleek and corporate, the kind of place where everyone moved with purpose and spoke in hushed, important tones. Emma was fascinated by the elevator, by the view from their adjoining rooms, by the fact that there were mints on the pillows and a menu for ordering breakfast to your room. "This is like a movie," she whispered to Ethan as they unpacked. "Are we really going to watch Lydia talk to senators tomorrow?" "We really are." "Will she be on TV?" "Probably. The hearing is public." Emma's eyes went wide. "My teacher is going to flip. Sophie's going to be so jealous." That evening, after Emma was asleep in the connecting room and Lydia had run through her testimony for the 4th time, Ethan found her on the balcony of her suite, staring out at the illuminated monuments scattered across the city. She'd changed into comfortable clothes, hair down, the professional armor set aside for the moment. "Can't sleep?" he asked, joining her. "Too much in my head. The testimony, the questions they might ask, whether I'm actually qualified to be influencing federal policy." She leaned into him when he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing and it damages the cause instead of helping it?" "Then you'll have said the wrong thing while trying to do the right thing, which is still better than not trying at all." Very philosophical for midnight. "I have my moments." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But seriously, Lydia, you've already proven you can create change. Crosstech is a model now. Other companies are following your lead. The Senate asked you to testify because you've demonstrated that this works. You're not theorizing about what might help. You're showing them what does help. And what if they don't care? What if this is just theater, checking a box so they can say they listen to stakeholders? Then you'll have spoken truth anyway. And the people watching who do care, the ones who've been fighting for accessibility their whole lives, they'll know someone with power is using it to advocate for them." Lydia turned in his arms, looking up at him. "When did you get so wise?" "Emma. She asks the hard questions and doesn't accept easy answers, forces me to think clearly. She's extraordinary. You both are." They stood on the balcony for a long time, holding each other against the cool night air and the weight of tomorrow, until exhaustion finally outweighed anxiety and sleep became possible. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the Dirksen Senate office building, which meant they arrived at 9 to navigate security and find their seats. Emma wore her nicest dress, the one saved for school photos and holiday dinners, and carried a small notebook she'd decorated with dinosaur stickers, determined to take notes on the proceedings. "Why?" Ethan had asked that morning. "Because this is history, Daddy, and I want to remember it." The hearing room was smaller than Ethan had imagined, wood-paneled and formal, with senators arranged in a semicircle and witnesses at a table facing them. Lydia sat with 2 other advocates, a disability rights attorney, and a technology accessibility consultant, looking calm despite the tension Ethan knew she was carrying. Emma sat between Ethan and Danny, who'd insisted on flying out to support them, notebook open and pencil ready. Around them, the gallery filled with journalists, advocates, cross-tech employees who'd taken personal days to attend, and people whose lives had been shaped by inaccessible spaces and discriminatory policies. The chairman called the hearing to order, and Ethan watched Lydia straighten in her chair, watched her transform into the CEO who dismantled a toxic corporate culture and built something better in its place. Her opening statement was powerful and personal, weaving her own experience with broader policy implications. She talked about the accident that had changed her life, about rebuilding identity and independence in a world designed for people whose bodies worked differently than hers. She talked about the cafe incident without naming names, framing it as emblematic of casual cruelty that went unchallenged too often. The question before this committee, Lydia said, her voice carrying through the room, is not whether we can afford to make our workplaces accessible. It's whether we can afford not to. Every person denied employment because of disability, every talented individual whose contributions are lost because we failed to provide reasonable accommodations, that's not just a moral failure. It's an economic one. We're leaving talent untapped, innovation unrealized, because we've decided that accessibility is optional rather than essential. She spoke about Crosstech's restructuring, about the concrete changes implemented and their measurable results. She presented data on employee satisfaction, retention rates, productivity metrics. She made the case that accessibility wasn't charity, it was good business and basic decency combined. The questions started gentle, senators asking for clarification on specific policies, requesting more detail about implementation costs and timelines. Lydia handled them smoothly, confident in her expertise, backing every claim with evidence. Then Senator Morrison, known for his skepticism of regulation, leaned forward. Ms. Cross, your company's experience is admirable, but you're a CEO with significant resources. How do we apply these standards to small businesses that don't have billions in revenue? Aren't we potentially creating undue burden? Lydia didn't hesitate. Senator, with respect, that's the wrong question. The right question is, how do we help small businesses understand that accessibility expands their customer base and talent pool? The mechanic shop that adds a ramp doesn't just serve wheelchair users. It serves elderly customers, parents with strollers, delivery workers with dollies. Accessibility benefits everyone. But the costs are often overstated. Simple accommodations, flexible scheduling, assistive technology, ergonomic adjustments, these rarely exceed a few $100s. And the return on investment, in terms of employee loyalty and expanded customer access, far outweighs initial expense. She leaned forward slightly. Senator, I'm not asking for charity or special treatment. I'm asking for the same thing every other American wants. The opportunity to contribute, to work, to participate in society without having to fight for access to spaces that should be available to everyone. Emma was writing furiously in her notebook, underlining phrases and drawing stars next to points she found particularly compelling. Ethan noticed several journalists doing the same thing, capturing not just Lydia's words but the passion behind them. Senator Chen, who'd introduced the proposed legislation, smiled. Ms. Cross, you mentioned a cafe incident in your opening remarks. Can you elaborate on how that personal experience informed your corporate policy decisions? Lydia took a breath, and Ethan saw her glance briefly toward where he and Emma sat. I was set up on what I believed was a blind date. What I didn't know was that it was a prank orchestrated by employees at my own company. The joke was supposed to be watching my date react to my disability, presumably with discomfort or rejection. The room had gone very quiet. What happened instead was that my date stayed. He treated me with respect and dignity. And when the people who'd set up the prank revealed themselves, he confronted them about the cruelty of their actions. Her voice was steady, but charged with emotion. That incident made me realize that the culture that permitted such behavior in my company was one I'd tolerated too long. I'd convinced myself that isolated incidents of ableism were just part of doing business, that I couldn't change hearts and minds through policy. I was wrong. And the individual who stayed, who confronted the employees involved, is he here today? Lydia's eyes found Ethan's across the room. He is, along with his daughter, who's teaching me that kindness and courage often look like simply showing up and refusing to accept cruelty as normal. Several senators turned to look at the gallery, trying to identify who she meant. Emma, oblivious to the attention, was still writing in her notebook, tongue poking out in concentration. The hearing continued for another 90 minutes, covering technical specifications, enforcement mechanisms, and funding provisions. Lydia fielded every question with competence and conviction, making the case that accessibility wasn't a burden to be managed, but an opportunity to be embraced. When it finally concluded, the chairman thanked the witnesses and announced the committee would take their recommendations under advisement. It was bureaucratic and anticlimactic, but as Lydia gathered her materials and the gallery began to disperse, Ethan could see the shift in energy. She'd moved people, not just with data and policy proposals, but with the authentic testimony of someone who'd lived the cost of inaccessibility and was determined to change it. They met her outside the hearing room, Emma immediately launching into a recap of her favorite parts, while Lydia listened with complete attention. Media requests came fast, reporters wanting interviews, quotes, reactions. Lydia handled a few, her PR team managing the rest, always positioning the conversation around policy rather than personality. By the time they made it back to the hotel, early afternoon sun slanting through the windows, all three of them were exhausted. Emma collapsed on the couch, announcing she needed a snack and also possibly a nap, which was unheard of for a 7-year-old who'd given up naps at 3. Ethan ordered room service while Lydia changed out of her formal clothes, emerging in jeans and a soft sweater, professional armor fully shed. When the food arrived, they ate together in comfortable silence, the adrenaline of the morning slowly fading into something calmer. "You were amazing," Ethan said finally. "Every part of it. The testimony, the questions, the way you made them understand that this isn't theoretical. It's about real people living real lives. I just told the truth. About my experience, about what works, about why it matters. That's what made it powerful. You weren't performing or posturing. You were just you." Emma, revived by food, piped up from where she'd been, doodling dinosaurs in her notebook. "You made that one senator look silly, the one who asked about small businesses. You told him he was asking the wrong question, and then you told him the right question, and he didn't have a good answer for that." Lydia laughed. "You were paying very close attention." "It was interesting, like watching Daddy when someone tries to tell him their car doesn't really need the repair he says it needs, and he has to explain why they're wrong, but in a nice way." "That's actually a pretty good comparison," Ethan admitted. They spent the afternoon being tourists, Emma's exhaustion forgotten in the excitement of monuments and museums. At the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, Emma dragged them straight to the dinosaur exhibits, providing running commentary on everything from bone structure to extinction theories, while other visitors listened with poorly concealed amusement. "She's going to be a paleontologist," one elderly woman told Ethan, "or a lecturer, possibly both." "Wouldn't surprise me either way," he agreed. That evening, back at the hotel with Emma finally asleep after a day that had overwhelmed even her considerable energy, Ethan found Lydia on the balcony again, phone in hand, scrolling through responses to the testimony. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Surprisingly good, actually. Most of the coverage is positive. Even the skeptical outlets are admitting I made compelling points." She looked up at him. "But there's something else, and something I need to tell you about." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Okay." "The lawsuits, Marcus and the others, their lawyers reached out this afternoon. They want to settle." "That's good news, isn't it?" "Yes and no. They'll drop the claims in exchange for severance packages and non-disclosure agreements. My legal team is recommending I take it. Clean break, no protracted court battle. Everyone moves on." "But you don't want to." Lydia set her phone down. "Part of me wants them to admit what they did was wrong. Wants public accountability, not just private settlement. But the practical part knows that dragging this out only keeps us in litigation instead of moving forward with the actual work of change." "What does your gut say?" "That I've already won what matters. The culture at Crosstech has changed. Other companies are implementing similar policies. I testified before Congress about accessibility. Marcus and his enablers, they're already irrelevant. Punishing them further doesn't accomplish anything except satisfying my anger. So you're going to settle? I think so. Is that weak? Ethan pulled her close, her back against his chest, both of them looking out at the city. It's strategic. There's a difference between letting people off without consequences and choosing not to waste energy on people who've already lost. They don't have jobs, their reputations are damaged, and they have to live with knowing they tried to humiliate someone and only expose their own cruelty. That's consequence enough. When did you get so wise about corporate litigation? When I started dating a CEO who faces impossible choices and somehow always finds the right answer. She turned in his arms, and he could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of carrying so much responsibility while also trying to build a personal life that felt genuine and sustainable. I love you, she said quietly. I don't think I tell you that enough, but I do. I love the way you see the world, the way you raise Emma, the way you make me believe that integrity actually matters more than strategy. I love you too, have since that cafe, probably. Certainly since you stayed and talked to me like I was worth knowing even after the worst possible first date. Best first date, she corrected, because it led to this, to us. To Emma calling me from school yesterday to tell me about her science project and asking if I could help her with the presentation. Ethan blinked. She called you? During lunch. Your number was busy, so she used the class phone. Very official, very Emma. Informed me that volcanoes are important and she needs my expertise on structural integrity. She didn't mention that. She's good at compartmentalizing, gets it from her father. Lydia smiled. But the point is, she's already integrated me into her life, and I want that. I want to be the person she calls when she needs help with science projects. I want to be here for both of you, not just occasionally, but permanently. Ethan's heart was suddenly racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that when we get back home, I want to start talking about what comes next. Not dating, not just spending time together, actually building a life. You and Emma and me figuring out what that looks like. She took a breath. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 2 months, but I also know that this is real, and I don't want to waste time being careful when I could be building something that matters. Yes. Yes? Yes to all of it. To building a life, to figuring out what comes next, to not wasting time. He cupped her face in his hands. Emma asked me 6 weeks ago if I was going to marry you. I told her we were taking it slow, but she was right to ask, because even then, part of me knew this was heading somewhere permanent. Lydia's laugh was watery. Is this a proposal? Not yet, because when I propose, I want it to be perfect. I want Emma involved in the planning. I want to do it right. He kissed her softly. But this is a promise that I'm in this completely, that we're building towards something that includes rings and commitments and Emma finally getting the mother figure she deserves. I can work with that. They stayed on the balcony until the night air grew too cold, then moved inside where Ethan checked on Emma, still sleeping, sprawled across the bed in the boneless way of exhausted children, before returning to Lydia's room. The next morning brought news that shifted everything one final time. Ethan was making coffee in the small kitchenette while Emma watched cartoons and Lydia checked her phone when she suddenly went very still. What is it? He asked. The cafe video, the original one from the security cameras. Someone leaked it, the full version, not just the 42 seconds that went viral. Ethan felt ice in his veins. How bad? It's not bad, it's... She turned the phone toward him, and he saw himself walking into the cafe, saw Lydia by the window, saw the entire interaction play out. The conversation, the laughter, the moment when the prank was revealed. His confrontation with the blonde woman and her friends. And then, after they left, the tender moment when he'd asked Lydia to stay, when they'd chosen to continue the date despite everything. It's beautiful, Lydia said softly. It shows the whole truth. Not just the confrontation, but the connection, the way we actually talked to each other, listened, chose each other. The video was already being shared widely, the comment sections filling with people responding to the fuller context. The narrative was shifting again, not just about standing up to bullies, but about the genuine relationship that had formed despite the cruelty, about choosing connection over comfort. Emma wandered over, curious about their focus on the phone. Is that you and Lydia? When you first met? It is, Ethan confirmed. You look happy. Even when those women were being mean, you looked happy to be there. She studied the screen seriously. That's how I know it's real. Because you chose to be happy even when it was hard. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds came wisdom that adults spent lifetimes learning. The flight home that afternoon felt different than the one to Washington, lighter somehow, despite everything they were carrying back with them. The testimony had gone better than hoped. The lawsuits would settle. The full cafe video had reframed the narrative yet again, this time in a way that felt true rather than exploitative. What happens now? Emma asked as the plane taxied toward their gate. Do things go back to normal? Ethan and Lydia exchanged glances, and he saw his own thought reflected in her eyes. There was no going back to normal because normal had fundamentally changed. I think we build a new normal, Lydia said, one that includes all of us figuring out what our life looks like together. Like a family? Exactly like a family. Emma considered this, then nodded with satisfaction. Good. I've always wanted a bigger family, and you're good at helping with homework. The weeks that followed were full of quiet transformations. The Senate committee passed the accessibility legislation with bipartisan support, citing Lydia's testimony as instrumental in building consensus. Crosstech continued implementing changes that were becoming industry standard, with 3 major competitors announcing similar initiatives. Marcus's lawsuit settled quietly, the terms confidential but the outcome clear. He and the others involved had accepted responsibility and moved on. There were no winners in that story, just consequences absorbed and lessons hopefully learned. At the garage, Ethan finally agreed to modest expansion. Not a chain, not an empire, just a second bay and 2 additional mechanics to handle the increased business that had become sustainable rather than viral. Danny was promoted to manager, handling scheduling and customer relations, while Ethan focused on the complex repairs he loved most. And through it all, Lydia was increasingly woven into the fabric of their lives. She came to Emma's school events, helped with homework that exceeded Ethan's 8th grade math skills, joined them for Saturday morning pancakes and Sunday evening movies. She introduced Emma to her company's engineers, who patiently explained accessibility technology to a 7-year-old with 1,000 questions. She taught Ethan to navigate corporate events without feeling like an imposter, while he taught her to fish with the patience required for someone who'd never sat still by water just waiting. 6 months after the cafe incident, on a Saturday morning that started with pancakes and ended with Lydia helping Emma build a model volcano, Ethan pulled out the ring he'd been carrying for 3 weeks. Emma knew. They'd picked it out together, Emma insisting on a stone that was interesting but not too fancy, because that was Lydia's style. They were in the backyard, Emma's volcano successfully erupting in a fountain of baking soda and vinegar, while Lydia laughed with delight. Ethan caught his daughter's eye, and she nodded with the gravity of someone holding an important secret. Lydia, Ethan said, and something in his tone made her turn from the volcano, made her see Emma's barely contained excitement and his own nervous determination. Yes? 6 months ago, I walked into a cafe for what I thought was a simple blind date. What I found instead was someone extraordinary, someone brave and brilliant and determined to make the world better, even when the world fought back. He took her hand, feeling it tremble slightly. You've become essential to our lives, to Emma's life and mine. You've shown us what it means to choose courage over comfort, integrity over convenience, and I want to choose you. Every day, permanently. He dropped to one knee, aware of Emma bouncing beside him, barely containing her enthusiasm. Lydia Cross, will you marry me? Lydia was crying, nodding before he'd even finished the question. Yes, absolutely yes. Emma erupted in cheers, throwing her arms around both of them and nearly knocking Ethan over in her enthusiasm. Can I be in the wedding? And can we have a dinosaur cake? And can I call you Mom? Lydia pulled back from Ethan long enough to look at Emma seriously. You can absolutely be in the wedding. We'll discuss the dinosaur cake. And yes, you can call me Mom if that's what feels right to you. It feels right. It's felt right for months, but Daddy said I should wait until after the proposal to mention it.
Your daddy is very wise. That evening, after Emma was finally in bed still talking about wedding plans and cake flavors and whether they'd get to wear fancy dresses, Ethan and Lydia sat on the porch in the cooling air, her left hand in his, both of them studying the ring that marked the beginning of their next chapter. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be engaged to a mechanic I met through a cruel prank, I'd have said they were delusional, Lydia said. But here we are. Here we are, Ethan agreed, building something real out of something that was meant to tear us down. Do you ever think about how differently it could have gone? If you'd left that cafe, if I'd given up on connection, if we'd let their cruelty define the moment instead of choosing something better. Sometimes. But then I remember Emma's face when you played dinosaurs with her, or the way you stood up to that Senate committee, or the fact that you're still here, choosing us even though easier options exist. He pulled her closer. We could spend forever thinking about alternate timelines. I'd rather spend it living this one. Good answer. The wedding happened 4 months later in the backyard where Ethan had proposed, small and intimate with just family and close friends. Emma served as junior bridesmaid, wearing a dress she'd helped design and carrying a bouquet that included her favorite flowers and Lydia's. Danny stood as best man, making a toast about how the best thing that ever happened to his boss was someone setting him up to fail, because failure opened doors that success never could. Ethan's mother cried through the entire ceremony, then cornered Lydia afterward to tell her she'd always wanted a daughter and was thrilled to finally get one. His father, true to form, asked when they could all go fishing, which Lydia promised would be soon. The Crosstech employees who attended brought gifts that were practical and thoughtful. Kitchen equipment from people who understood that Lydia could barely cook, books about blended families, a donation to the accessibility advocacy organization that had been Lydia's passion project for years. They treated Ethan not as the CEO's mechanic husband, but as the person who'd seen their boss's worth when others tried to diminish it, and that respect felt earned rather than obligatory. The cafe video, both versions, had long since faded from viral relevance, but its impact remained in the accessibility standards Crosstech had pioneered, in the federal legislation it had helped inspire, in the countless conversations it had sparked about dignity and worth and choosing kindness over cruelty. A year after the wedding, Lydia opened the Dignity Initiative, a foundation focused on workplace accessibility and disability rights. Funded by her personal wealth and managed with the same fierce competence she brought to everything. The cafe that had been the site of that original confrontation became the foundation's headquarters, transformed from a place of humiliation into a space dedicated to advocacy and change. Emma, now 9, had strong opinions about the foundation's logo and insisted on being involved in the youth outreach program they were developing. She gave talks at her school about accessibility, using her experience watching Lydia navigate the world to teach her peers about empathy and inclusion. She was still obsessed with dinosaurs, but now that obsession extended to accessibility in museums and public spaces because she'd learned from her parents that caring about something meant working to make it better. Ethan's garage thrived, not because of viral fame, but because of the reputation he'd built for honesty and quality work. He trained young mechanics, teaching them not just technical skills, but the integrity that made a business sustainable. Some of his employees were people with disabilities who'd struggled to find work elsewhere, and Ethan took satisfaction in knowing his shop modeled the principles Lydia advocated for. On the second anniversary of their first meeting, they returned to that cafe, now the foundation headquarters, for a quiet moment together. The space had been transformed, made fully accessible, decorated with photos from their journey and testimonials from people whose lives had been changed by the work growing out of that awful, perfect day. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asked, standing in the spot where Ethan had first sat down across from her. "The attention, the scrutiny, the way your whole life changed because you chose to stay?" Ethan looked at her, his wife, his partner, the woman who'd taken Emma's hand that morning and helped her with homework before they left. He thought about the family they'd built, the changes they'd helped create, the life that had emerged from a moment of choosing integrity over comfort. "Not even a little bit," he said. "Every difficult thing that came from that choice led to something better. To us, to this, to Emma having the mother she deserves, and me having the partner I didn't know I needed. We did good, didn't we? Taking something meant to hurt us and turning it into something that helps others. We did great, and we're not done yet." Emma called from across the room, wanting to show them the new accessibility display she'd helped design. They went to her, the three of them standing together in the space where cruelty had tried to define them and kindness had won instead. Outside, the city moved on with its usual rhythm. But here, in this transformed space with its history and hope woven together, Ethan Brooks and Lydia Cross stood with their daughter and understood that the best victories weren't the ones that made headlines. They were the quiet triumphs of showing up, choosing integrity, and building something meaningful from the moments when the world expected you to fail. They'd started with a blind date designed to humiliate. They'd built a family, changed corporate culture, influenced federal policy, and created a foundation dedicated to dignity and access. Not because they were special or extraordinary, but because they'd chosen again and again to do the right thing even when doing nothing would have been easier. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. The cafe video, both versions, lived on in digital archives and disability studies courses as a case study in how individual actions could spark systemic change. But for Ethan, Lydia, and Emma, it was just the beginning of their story. The moment when three lives intersected and chose connection over cruelty, courage over comfort, and love over fear. What had started as the cruelest setup became the foundation of something beautiful. Not despite the pain it caused, but because they'd refused to let that pain define them. They'd taken the worst moment and transformed it into their best life. And every morning when Ethan woke up next to Lydia, when Emma called them both for breakfast, when their little family moved through the routines that made up a life, he remembered that single choice in a cafe 2 years ago. He'd stayed. She'd stayed. And together they'd built something that would last far beyond viral videos and media attention and the temporary nature of fame. They'd built home,